Hello, this is Gonzalo Lira speaking to you live, and this is the Roundtable Open House. And we're basically going to shoot the shit. And I have no idea what we're going to be talking about or who's going to show up. And so, here I am with Brian, and we were talking. This, by the way, if you're not up to date on the soap opera, you got to catch up with the episodes, man, because we're just going to dive in like everybody knows more or less what we're talking about. And we're not going to give big descriptions of stuff unless it's like some obscure fact or some bit of knowledge that's just come in. OK, we were talking about just before we started about Zelensky desperately going and asking to join NATO. Please, Mr. Stoltenberg, let me join NATO. And I was really surprised when Jens Stoltenberg, he came out right away, right out of the gate. And I thought he was going to say, okay, but no, he was like, no, Ukraine is not going to join NATO. So it's pretty clear that they have no intention whatsoever of ever allowing NATO to put boots on the ground in Ukraine. I mean, that's my takeaway from that. What do you think?
I mean, the whole point of having a proxy war is to get someone else to pay for it and bleed for it. So that was the whole point of arming Ukraine, of trying to bait Russia into fighting with Ukraine in the first place. They really don't want to. And I don't know. I have not looked into the details. As I said on my, I just put a new video up on my channel. I was kind of like under the weather, so I'm like catching up. And I'm looking at a Politico article right now, and they've got like Zelensky outside at a yeah. Let's see
if you can share it. I'll put it on screen, man. And, okay. And what do they have Zelensky doing?
He's got a desk outside, and it looks like he's like signing.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
So what is he doing? Like he's signing some document that he made up himself about how they're going to accelerate, or Ukraine is giving NATO permission to accelerate their admission to NATO. Something really weird like that. I had no idea because I didn't look into it yet.
It was basically like a letter saying, please let us join NATO on an accelerated basis or some shit like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, even if they were serious about having Ukraine join NATO, can you join NATO while you're in the middle of a war? I don't think that you can.
No,
that doesn't work out too well.
It's one of the articles of NATO. I mean, first of all, you need unanimity from NATO. So Turkey's going to say no. So what's the point? It's just grandstanding. And by the way, that picture that was definitely filmed. That's a for real picture. It wasn't staged or green screened. Okay, yeah. I could tell because the background was sort of like overblown. See, and because they were probably in the shade, but whoever was filming it didn't have the lights to compensate, and that's why it looked weird like that. But it was a real picture. I mean, and actually in Kiev, because I recognized the city streets. And no, I think that NATO's rules. One of the articles, I forget which one, explicitly says that no country can join NATO if it's currently in a war or in some kind of border dispute, because obviously they when they formulated NATO, they didn't want to invite countries that were in the middle of a conflict and potentially drag everybody into this conflict automatically. And that makes complete sense. But I mean, I why did he do it? Oh yeah, because Putin annexed the 4 regions. What did you think of the speech?
Well, like I said, I didn't get to watch the speech, but I saw Alex and Alexander of the Duran break it down. Yeah. So I know the basic components. And these all are things that we all knew about for years and years. People following geopolitics knew that this was the truth all along, and that nations like Russia and China were not saying these things openly because they always hoped that down the road, eventually people would come to their senses, avoid conflict, and come to some sort of understanding. But it's very clear that the West, when I say the West, I mean these unelected special interests running things against the best interests of the majority of the people living in the West. Yeah. They're not going to come to any sort of understanding. They're going to continue forward. Nothing's going to stop them unless they are physically stopped. And that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
So no point couching your your points now. Vladimir Putin can now come out and just openly say this because there's nothing that he can save at this point.
Yeah, I mean it's insofar as Russia and Europe is concerned, with the destruction of Nord Stream 2, and Alexei was talking about how the Turk Stream that goes through Turkey to Serbia and Hungary, that might be on the table as well for destruction, right? But I mean, all of a sudden, and with this latest last ditch, sanctions package, basically Europe and Russia are carrying out the most brutal divorce imaginable, and only one needs the other. I mean, it is a lopsided relationship. Oh, what the hell are these? I mean, the Europeans, man, it's just like I don't get them. I just don't get them. I've talked to some Germans, by the way, some German acquaintances and friends who live there. And they are so disconnected from this. They have no idea what's coming for them, by the way. They don't realize that they are going to go cold and hungry and in the dark this winter. I mean, I'm not kidding. They have no idea. And I'm talking educated people, well-to-do people, people that should know better, people who are supposed to be informed. But, the propaganda is such that they have no idea what's about to hit them, and they have no idea who's actually responsible. It's always, blame Putin. I mean, we talk about the psyops, and we are, hip to it, if you want to put it in those terms, right? But the common people are so not. I mean, they just don't get it. Oh man, how do you?
Well, I mean, what I always say about Europe is that Europe has it's just like a country the U.S. is targeting for regime change elsewhere. They cultivate leadership that's going to answer to Washington, not the people of the actual country they're in. That's what you've got in Europe. You've got a leadership class that reflects Washington's interests. They don't represent the people of Europe. This is why they're making these suicidal decisions.
Yeah.
I have been actually following the Nord Stream 2, its construction, for years and years. I was writing articles years ago about how, if it were to work, if Germany and the rest of Europe worked more closely with Russia, they would, this would be very constructive, and this would help Europe out from under the hegemony of the U.S. that the U.S. has cast over Europe since the end of World War II. And I thought that this was a good development, but I also knew that the U.S. would do almost anything to stop that from happening, to stop Nord Stream 2. I would always ask at the end of every article. Back then I didn't do videos, I did articles under a pen name, and I would always ask at the end, how far will the U.S. go? And we see the Nord Stream 1 and 2, I don't know to what extent, but attacked, damaged. I think that's our answer.
It's gone. Apparently they hit all 4 pipelines. I mean, because each one has a pipeline going to and fro, right? Actually, I don't quite understand why.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
But okay, be that as it may. But they hit all 4 of those pipes and blew it to smithereens. Apparently, the saltwater damage is such that they're permanently inoperable. I mean, it's just throw it away and redo it. And how long did it take to build these goddamn pipelines? I mean, Nord Stream 2, how long did that take? 5 years?
I don't know, but I've been writing about it for years. Like, the one article that I found was dated 2018. So it was a project. It was a big project, and they wrecked it. And the idea that because I see the Western media trying to float the notion that Russia did this. Why would Russia? This is their leverage over Europe. And think about this. You're going into winter. The people in Europe are going to start getting upset and protest. There's going to be huge pressure on Germany to open Nord Stream 2, to come to some agreement with Russia, to get the gas flowing again. You knew that was going to happen. Now it is impossible for it to happen. Why would Russia do that to themselves? They would not. It's obviously the U.S.
I mean, a child can see it, and
except the people writing in The Guardian, apparently. Well,
no, what's funny is that, there's been sort of like this semi-blackout of news of it. I've been looking at CNN and BBC, and it's off the radar. It happened this past week, and this is, I mean, first of all, as an environmental disaster, because that's what it is, it's poisoning the Baltic Sea. I don't know if there's fishing and stuff like that, but the whole environmentalism angle. they're ignoring it, and the geopolitical angle, ignoring it. And whenever they do, it's like, the Russians must have done it. Oh man, come on.
Have you heard any logical explanation or reason
Yes, I did.
why Russia would do this?
I did. Because you see, Russia and China are like really friendly, but China and India, not so much. So it was the Indians that did it for the Russians with their sneaky Indian submarine that went all the way from the Indian Ocean to the Buff.
No way.
Oh, come on, man. I mean, there isn't any logic to it. I mean, come on. It's just what? Go ahead.
Well, I was also going to say, like if you're a commander in the military and you want your guys to fight to the death, you put their backs against the wall and the enemy. And this is from Sun Tzu, The Art of War, where you throw I'm reading from it. I don't have this memorized. You throw your soldiers into a position.
That's Jesus, Brian. I used to think of you here, and now it's like down here, man. Jesus, you didn't memorize Sun Tzu, dude. Low. That's fucking low, man. I mean, chat,
I'll just go ahead and
is Brian a big old loser because he hasn't memorized Sun Tzu? Tell us in the chat.
Yeah, verbatim. So
but
anyway, they say throw your soldiers into positions whence there is no escape, and they will prefer death to flight. And I see the United States trying to maneuver Europe into this type of position where they have no exit and they have no choice but to double down with the United States. Of course, Europe is going to be paying the price much more than the U.S. All the way on the other side of the Atlantic. The U.S.
the Americans are going to make
energy
money off of this shit.
Yeah. And remember how they were talking about, we need to move industry back to the United States. Well, instead of getting industry from China to come back to the United States, they're actually just going to take all the industry from Europe. So this is what the U.S. is doing to its supposed allies. And I just hope everyone is taking notes. There's a lot of countries, developing countries around the world that, they call it the global South or whatever you want to call it. I hope they're taking notes and they understand that the U.S. is not interested in friendship or partnership, and you need to protect yourself from them because they will, if they're doing this to Europe, what do you think they're going to do to, say, a nation in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, the speech that Putin gave, which I linked in the description, by the way, so you can go check it out. It's about 35 minutes long, and you can put it on double speed and read the subtitles because that version, by the way, is with subtitles. The speech was clearly aimed for the global South, if you want to call it that, right? I mean, it's a little bit more than that. Obviously, it's really the global South and East, if you will, and it was clearly tailored. I watched the speech in full, and it is comparable to the 2007 Munich speech. It's essentially a lawyer's brief for the prosecution against the United States and the West. And he calls them outright. He says that they're neo-colonialists and that they don't give a shit about anybody. They only care about their interests. Well, Henry Kissinger himself said it. That the United States doesn't have friends or allies. It only has interests. Yeah. And, he was very compelling. It was remarkable how little he talked about the annexation of these territories. He didn't talk about the historical context of it or anything like that. But he talked a lot of history about American history. He did not, under any circumstances, say that he was going to throw a nuclear weapon, which that's, making the rounds like crazy. He said that the United States was the only country that had ever used nukes twice. And he emphasized the firebombing of Dresden and Cologne, and I forget the third German city. And he said how that was not militarily necessary. And he really just he basically said it was a war crime. He didn't use those words per se, but it was really the prosecution's brief against the United States, and the United States did not look good. He talked about Vietnam, Korea. I mean, like I said, it was like a mini history of American involvement and American duplicity, and claiming to uphold values of democracy and freedom and all that, but it's just all so much bullshit. And it was extremely compelling, and everything he said would have elicited nods from people in the global South and East. you know? So I think that the speech was extraordinarily effective, even if the West is spinning it. I mean, how are they spinning it? I haven't actually been up to date on that. I know that they're talking about him threatening nuclear war, but
well, I kind of skipped through a New York Times article about it very quickly, and you know, they had neo-colonial in quotation marks, like it isn't true. like the US doesn't have their military all around, wrapping around the planet, and isn't illegally occupying multiple countries. And they're crying about these referendums and these regions joining Russia, while the US and its allies have done this over and over again, you know, just carving up countries however they see fit, usually without any referendum. I mean, they're trying to turn the heat up in Serbia over Kosovo. There was no referendum before they. I think there was in 1991. That is separate from the later Declaration of Independence, like years apart. They were not connected. So I mean, the West has spent decades creating a precedent for Russia to do this. Yeah. And then when you actually look at the details of why Russia is doing this, they're actually justified. Whereas how can the US justify going to the other side of the planet, invading a country, illegally occupying it for 20 years or more? How can they? They can't.
No, they can't at all. And by the way, chat, I just wanted to thank Yannick, who's in the chat. He's moderating. Chat, be nice, Yannick. You know, if anybody gets out of hand, you know, you got the band hammer, so feel free to use it. And thank you, Yannick, so much for moderating today. So anyway, yeah. So the other thing that happened is that the British economy is collapsing. You've been following that shit? Oh my God.
I mean, I know that the European economy as a whole is not doing well, and will just do worse and worse as winter comes. And like everyone has said, even if they make it through the winter and people don't freeze to death or suffer from the cold, the problem is if you have turned off the gas from Russia and now you're depending on liquid natural gas from wherever, it's always going to be more expensive. You just priced yourself out of competing with the rest of the world that's doing manufacturing. You're done forever. What are you going to do after that? There's no answer. I've not seen any plan. So they're saying it could take 5 or 10 years to recover from this. I think it's indefinite. It's indefinite.
Well, I mean, anything can happen in 5 to 10 years or 15 years, right? But I would agree. I think that the next 5 years are going to be catastrophic for Europe, for Western Europe. I'm talking Germany, France, the Netherlands. And I never thought I'd be saying that in my lifetime, but they can't recover from this shit. They simply cannot. And they keep on doubling down, man. That's the worst part. And they keep on insisting on failed policies and failed approaches. And the people holding power, they got their claws into it, and they do not let go. And they keep on doing this stupid bullshit. And I mean, look, I am not conspiratorially minded, but you know, sometimes I think to myself, well, maybe, you know, those crazy tinfoil hat brigade, man, maybe they're right. You know, maybe this is some grand conspiracy of the World Economic Forum, because the absolute economic annihilation of Europe is just, dude, something to behold. It's sort of like it has a grandiosity in its self-destructiveness. You know what I mean? Anyway, what happened in England is that they had essentially a Minsky moment, where they realized that the liquidity was collapsing, and they were going to have bank failures. They were going to have a Lehman moment, and they freaked out. The Bank of England, because they're pursuing contradictory policies. They're cutting taxes to put more money out on the street, and the Bank of England at the same time is raising interest to remove money from the street. So it's this contradictory policy. The Chancellor of the Exchequer that they have is a fucking imbecile. I mean, the guy is a fucking moron, you know? And of course, I'm going to be called racist because this guy is black. He's the first black or Indian, I think. I actually don't know. I don't care. He's just a moron. His skin color doesn't matter. It's the gray matter that he has underneath. And that gray matter is sorely deficient, okay? And he what's her name? Liz Truss, after 3 weeks in power, it looks like she's toast. It's looking like the conservatives want to get rid of her. And she hasn't been in office 3 weeks. I mean, how do you fuck it up that badly? Well, she's the woman who insisted that Rostov would never be a part of Russia. Rostov and Voronezh, Oh, look who we got here. Okay, Brian, stop talking about Alex, okay? I agree with everything that you were saying about him and the beard and the whole thing, but shh. Alex, my man, how's it going? Good to see you, my friend.
How you doing, Gonzalo? Good to see you. How are you, Brian? Good to see you.
I'm doing well. How are you? How's everything?
Good.
Now, we were talking about England and how fucked it is. I mean, dude, you've been following that shit show?
Yeah, we have a video. I'll try to get it up this evening on the UK and everything that's going on there. Alexander's on the ground there, so he's got a good feel for things.
What's he saying?
What he's been saying for a while now, it's bad. It's bad. Very bad. Very, 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 very bad. Very bad.
Yeah, I mean, you're lucky because you're in Cyprus right now, and it looked like you were going through a heat wave. I saw your video yesterday where you were sweating, man, dude.
Oh, man. Today, the same. I did a video this morning. I'll get it up, and the same thing. I mean, it is 35, 40 degrees Celsius, man. It's
global
crazy.
Warming. I guess
it's always been like that. It's always been like that. Cyprus is a very long summer, but the winters are mild here, so we'll be relatively okay.
Yeah, because in Germany, and I was telling Brian before that I have a lot of friends in Germany. And one and all, and these are educated people and people who are sort of like on top of the news. I mean, they don't focus on it as much as we do, obviously, but they're sort of like on top of things. And they have no idea what's about to hit them. And they have no clue. And the ones who do, it's like blame Putin. That's the narrative. Yeah. And it's just so, it's kind of embarrassing to tell you the truth.
Well, that's why the Nord Stream thing is so good for Ursula and Michelle and Borrell.
Oh, yeah.
Because when people go out on the streets and when people complain, they're going to say, look, we'd like to help everybody. Yeah, absolutely. We'll negotiate with Russia. Absolutely. We'll start up Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2. But,
they don't work.
Because Putin blew it up.
It's very convenient how that all worked out, isn't it?
Absolutely.
They've been kind of boxed in there. No choice now but to double down with the U.S.
It's exactly what they're going to say. That's exactly what the EU leaders are going to say. They're going to say, look, we would have loved to have negotiated some sort of deal to get the pipelines going again. But Putin, the madman, he just blew them up. I don't know why he did it.
Yeah, totally unpredictable. And I was telling Brian that I saw the speech. It was a pretty damn good speech. And it ranks up with the 2007 Munich speech. It's definitely worth reading. And I told him that it's basically a legal brief against the United States and the global American empire. And it was very compelling. And I think that it will find its target audience in the global South and East. And so, but anyway, the English thing, I'm like, I cannot believe that we are about to see parity between the British pound and the U.S. dollar. Everybody's fleeing to the dollar. And it looks as if the Americans basically destroyed the economies of all their allies to prop up the American economy for just a little bit longer, because the systemic problems of the American economy are such that, very, very high inflation, if not hyperinflation, is in the offing for the dollar. That's kind of like inevitable. But at the same time, there's going to be this weird deflationary spiral. I mean, it's kind of like both things happening at once. It's too complicated to explain casually, but it seems that the Americans blew up Nord Stream to totally decimate the European economy so they'd get ahead for a little while longer. I mean, with friends like that, man, you don't need enemies. It's just... Now, Brian, what do you think?
Now with the Nord Stream pipelines damaged like this, I mean, what could the U.S. now convince Europe to go ahead and do now that there's really no way to repair anything with Russia? I mean, there's no reason to, because they're not going to get their gas not through these pipelines.
Yeah.
What could they convince the EU to go ahead and do in terms of doubling down on backing Ukraine. I mean, we were watching them empty out their inventories, just dumping money into this. They're taking all of these refugees fleeing from Ukraine. These are all burdens that they're going to have to deal with, in addition to the energy crisis they're going to start having. What else could the U.S. convince them to do now that there's really no way back? And
they don't have
really
to
think
convince
that
them of
was
anything. They don't have to convince them.
What will they do? What are they going to do now? What is Europe? What's their next step now? Now that this, were they even possibly thinking about, suffering this damage during the winter and then trying to repair things with Russia? Or
I think
not?
all that Europe can do is just roll up in a ball and cry. Because, I mean, honestly, what else can they do? What other policy options are left open? I mean, Alex, you tell me.
Control to the center.
But I mean, what could the Europeans do to get out of this hole?
Well, you're supposing that
assuming
Ursula,
they wanted to.
You assume that Ursula and those people want to get out of this hole. I mean, they're the ones that are pushing for it. Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing, that the leadership in Europe right now does not represent European interests. knowing that, and knowing that people are going to start become increasingly upset and protest. Now, even if they were to somehow throw these people out, they have created a situation where no matter who ends up in office, you're still not getting the gas. You're still not able to this is them burning bridges, destroying pipelines. Really, it's like literally destroying pipelines.
You're Habeck and Baerbock and the Greens in Germany. For them, this is fine. Let's get rid of this pipeline. We're not going back to Russian gas. Our destiny is 20 years in the future, where we're all going to be driving cars with solar panels on top of them, and we're going to build this green utopia. I mean, for them, this is also fine. The leadership in Europe, the leadership class in Europe, there may be some people that are shocked by this. Maybe in some smaller countries here and there, and maybe some people that are not, in the inner circle and are not in the know. But I think most of them are, even if they may have not known about what was going to happen to NS1 and 2, I bet you they're kind of like, just like that Sikorsky guy. They're kind of like, that's okay, no problem.
I couldn't believe he tweeted that out.
Yeah, well, I don't think he knew. I don't think he knows anything. Specifically knows anything, but even after he tweeted it out, he removed it, but he still came up with a statement and said, I'm still happy, it was done. And I think that's the point for all of these guys. They're fine with it. Their only fear is that people will get out on the streets and remove them from power. It's not even so much people getting out on the streets. It's people out on the streets and removing them from power. That's what they fear the most. That's what they don't want. So for them, this is fine. People are going to suffer. That's fine. No gas. That's fine. People getting out on the streets. That's okay. People getting on the streets, but just don't come near our parliament. Don't come near our president's office. Don't come near where we are.
The Martha's Vineyard thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Brian, you saw that thing?
I don't know. What are you talking about?
Oh, you missed it, man. It was, I forget if it was DeSantis or Abbott in Texas, who shipped over 50 Nicaraguan refugees to Martha's Vineyard by plane and dumped them in Martha's Vineyard. And they had a fit. I mean, they had a complete fit. And chat, for you guys who are international who might not know, Martha's Vineyard is this little island off the coast of Massachusetts that is it's filled with mansions. Rich people live there. Barack Obama bought some enormous compound there. It's where the rich people live. And they had a complete shit fit. And they got those guys, those 50 refugees. I mean, I'm talking women and children, right? like the prototypical, not, military age men like went to Germany, but no, they were actual families. I think that they were handpicked to be as sympathetic as possible. And they got all those people in a day and a half, I think it was, less than a day and a half, gathered them all up and shipped them to a military base somewhere, basically under arrest. Okay. And everybody was saying that, I think it was DeSantis saying that they were, human trafficking and using people as weapons and all kinds of bullshit. And of course, they don't mention the fact that the Biden administration has been shipping plane loads of Somali refugees to Lewiston, Maine, of all places, and dumping them there. And, that's okay. But don't you dare send them to Martha's Vineyard. I mean, the rank hypocrisy, man. It was despicable.
Well, yeah, we see it every day. Yeah. I mean, just it's everywhere around us. When DiCaprio sits there and he talks about climate change, and then he gets on a private plane in a yacht, and then he parties with 5 supermodels. I mean, you see it every single minute of every day, the hypocrisy. But this is how they view the world. For them, the world is wide open. They can go anywhere. They can do anything. They run the show. For everybody else, it's just stay put. Don't go anywhere. Don't travel anywhere. Don't bother us. Don't impede on our territory, on our areas, and just sit there and be quiet and just do your thing. That's the way they're looking at the world. And that's how they want to set things up. Going back to your Europe question, Brian and Gonzalo, I just think that the EU is going to do what the EU has always done. It's just going to try to absorb more and more power and centralize everything. That is the trajectory and the nature of the European Union. That's what it's been doing since its inception. That's what it's going to continue to do. It's going to find ways to centralize more power to Brussels.
And the protesters in Germany, for example, demanding that the pipelines be reopened, and also big industry in Germany, manufacturing. What are they going to do now? And are they doing anything, or what do you think that they will do? Because I don't know that much about the internal political affairs of Europe, but I could imagine that this is a big problem for them, to say the least.
You're muted,
Gonzalo. You're muted.
You're still muted.
Yeah.
Still muted.
Sorry about that. Okay. I was checking something, and that's why I muted myself. No, it's catastrophic for the German industry. There was actually the CEO of a garment manufacturing company who seems to be like a guy who's pretty plugged in, and he was furious. You saw that one, Alex?
Mm-hmm. They're furious, but you can see that they're helpless. They're still not doing anything. That's been incredible. One of my biggest questions. Yeah, I've always been kind of wondering, why are they not doing or saying anything? I believe they're trying to work behind. Yeah, they're trying to work behind the scenes as well. I think not to much success. I do believe that they've been working to get some sort of a ceasefire, and I do believe that a couple of weeks ago we may have been close to getting something.
You think so? Why?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That? Well, look, I think a prisoner swap. I think the referenda. And I think the partial mobilization, all of these things were, to me, were signals that with the right mediation and perhaps getting the Zelensky regime to come to its senses somehow, which is near next to impossible. But I think it was just kind of like a Hail Mary, get them to come to their senses. Perhaps the conflict could have been frozen where it was, i.e., Russia says, here are our gains. We're consolidating our gains. We've exchanged our prisoners. And this is our warning. We're ramping up. We're going to ramp up now. So,
well, what would tie in was that conversation between Zaluzny, the commander-in-chief of the Zelensky regime forces, and the Russian commander-in-chief. They had a telephone conversation. And that would sort of like...
Rumor has it. Yeah, rumor has it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, both sides have denied it, but yeah.
And another question: when when did they decide to hit the Nord Stream pipelines? Was that because the way I immediately perceived it was Russia has just escalated. They're taking these territories. They're mobilizing 300,000. You can pretend that 300,000 extra soldiers isn't going to make a difference, but we all know they know that it's going to. They know where this is all headed. So they thought, well, we need to have a big move. What can we do? We don't have anything more we can send Ukraine, nothing practical. They're talking about sending 18 more HIMARS years from now. So that's not a big move they can make. So I think maybe that's when they said, let's hit the Nord Stream pipelines. But maybe they planned it sooner, before that, already planned to do it. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
I think it's like a plan B for the U.S.
Also, it seems clear to me that not everybody knew it was coming, because it seemed that there were sectors of the American regime that were caught off guard, that were like, whoa, what the fuck happened? I mean, they
can't
really
get their narrative straight. Yeah,
Yeah,
and they can't get their
Yeah,
narrative straight.
They can't.
Yeah, they can't iron it out. They can't get it straight. They're still trying to fish around for some sort of explanation, which will make sense to pin it on Russia. But I think there's parts of the U.S. government, the deep state, most likely the State Department. I feel the State Department's probably really knee deep into this.
I think it was Newland, by the way. I think
the State Department, the Clintons, Newlands, all of these, the neocons, all of these people. To me, I think that they're looking at this and they know that with partial mobilization, there's no way that Ukraine's going to come out of this. They see what's happening. They know the position that Ukraine is in. I was just watching your video just now, Brian. I mean, they know that Ukraine's their weapons are depleted. They're now getting old tanks, like you said in your video. They're bringing in old. Yeah, exactly. Bringing old tanks. Europe is collapsing. It has no money. It has no weapons to send them. They've lost 15% of their territory. And if I was the State Department, I would say, look, it's probably not going to end well for Ukraine. But at least as Russia is consolidating their gains, it's time for us to consolidate our gains. And to me, that's Europe.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You take whatever parts of Ukraine you're going to take. Well, we're going to take Germany, and we're going to take Europe. Yeah.
And then honestly, what is the future for Europe? I mean, no industry. They're depending on LNG from the US, I assume. Eventually can they reach capacity, and then in how many years? And then what? Because like what is obvious to everyone is they have outpriced themselves in terms of industry.
Yeah. And there's something else.
I just don't get what they're doing next.
Yeah, there's something else that people don't seem to realize, that, a few years ago, there was this labor revamping of the labor markets in Germany. And it seriously lowered the price of labor in Germany to make it competitive. And so the people in Germany, the average worker, is not doing that well, as is, before this whole conflict started, let alone with these shortages of natural gas and electricity that we're going to be having. And so I think that the German economy is going to tailspin a lot faster than people realize. And it's going to go into a full-on depression, now. Like, in March, if you told me that German unemployment by March of 23 is at 20%, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, that kind of level of unemployment, which is catastrophic, especially when you have a welfare state that guarantees to all the workers, at least something to survive, but it's not going to be able to afford to pay out all of these workers. And so it's screwed. I mean, this is the end of the road insofar as the German welfare state is concerned. The German economy is broken irretrievably because, with the Nord Stream pipelines gone, there's no way that they can restart the industry. And this is a true tragedy. All the work that the Germans did post World War II, it's out the window. It's gone, and it's gone forever. And it's minimum 5 years, assuming that they could get some energy source. If you told me that's going to be a 20-year depression, wouldn't be surprised, And my thinking has always been that the migrant population is what the Germans should be really worried about. because those people are military-age men, unemployed, no money from the state because the state won't be able to afford it, because either the euro will have collapsed or there's simply not going to be enough goods and services to go around. And so you're going to see an absolute, I mean, it's going to be a roiling cauldron of social unrest, and it's going to last at least 3 years. The initial phase of this depression. And you tell me if Alex, you tell me if you think I'm more or less on point or off my rocker. Most people think I'm off my rocker, but I'm hoping
you're
for
exactly
somebody.
right. No, you're exactly right. I mean, it's going to be extremely difficult, but they believe that they can manage it because in their minds,
I
managed it. Yeah, they managed it in Portugal, in Spain, in Greece, in Cyprus, in Ireland. You know, for them, they think they've kind of been there before.
Yeah.
During the meltdown in 2009, 10, 11, 12, all of that, they feel like, you know what, we can manage it as long as people don't get out on the streets and throw us out of office. That's their number one greatest fear. The rest of it, they can manage it. I was in Greece, 25% unemployment, 30%. 30% unemployment. People sitting at cafes all day.
Nothing to do.
Yeah. And so they feel like they can manage this for 3, 4, 5 years until some magic high in the sky energy, flux capacitor, Back to the Future flux capacitor is invented, and there you go, and problem solved. Or they get their regime change in Russia and they get President Navalny. Wouldn't that be nice?
Oh my God. Well, yeah, that is the plan. They wanted to, at the end of the Cold War, they wanted to strip mine Russia, the Soviet Union, whatever was left of it. And in the 80s, they wanted to overthrow the government in China, and they were going to just run the whole show. And they weren't able to do that. They failed in both accounts. Now they have run out of time. They are desperate. I don't even think they have a plan for Europe, to be honest. I just think they saw Nord Stream 2, Germany working with Russia, China talking about one belt, one road with Europe, shipping all of this stuff across the Eurasia to Europe and back again. And they realized Europe is going to get out from under our hegemony unless we do something drastic to stop it. And then once that happens, American hegemony is done forever. It'll never be viable ever again. So this is their answer to it, and they're not really thinking about the next step because they realize we have to do this first, no matter what, and then we'll figure out the rest later. But I don't think they have a plan for later. I don't think they have a viable plan for later.
No plan whatsoever. None whatsoever. It's all being improvised on the spot. What I find really interesting is this revanchist Poland that is making noises like it's pretending to be a big dog when it's still just a little chihuahua. Okay, maybe not a chihuahua like the Baltic republics, more like I don't know, like a corgi, But I mean, they are acting and talking all tough, and it seems that they want a piece. I mean, they very badly want a piece of Western Ukraine, which is what I predicted back in April. That they were going to want a piece of it, and it looks like they're putting the pieces in place to get that piece of Western Ukraine.
I wouldn't rule out NATO attempting in some way to intervene, creating a buffer zone and preserving at least part of Ukraine, just like they did in Syria. They were able to manage, avoiding a clash with Russia in Syria. I think they feel like they could do that again in Ukraine if they had to. Also, it's just speculation, but it just seems like the leadership in Poland, someone is whispering into their ear, talking them into a fight.
Anne Applebaum,
basically.
that's her name. Yeah. Anne Applebaum.
Who could it be?
Yeah. And she's getting her talking points from, Toria Nuland, man. Oh, man. It's just so... It's so pathetic, and Sikorsky, that tweet by Sikorsky, that was the thing that clued me in. And my thinking also is, by the way, that the Poles were involved in the sabotage. Of course, this is speculation, but look, this is an open house. By the way, chat, we're just shooting the shit, okay? So feel free to speculate to your heart's content, because that's part of the fun of all this shit, of like, figuring out what's going to be the next chapter in this particular soap opera. But as so far as them having no plan, no question. As so far as the Poles having a plan, it's taking a chunk of it. They want to redo the Polish-Lithuanian Empire. I mean, that's what they want to do, and oh man, it's just all kinds of funny, because they believe that they have a power that they simply do not have. I'm not talking just about the Poles. I'm talking about the Europeans and even NATO and the Americans. They honestly think that they are going to be able to somehow change what is inevitable. And the inevitability to me is that the Russians are going to take over all of Ukraine. They are going to defend their territory. Chat is saying that the Russians have been defeated at Lyman. Is this accurate, Chat? Chat, can you find out about?
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking at this right before it started. I mean, here's the thing: they launched the Kharkov offensive. Russia obviously didn't have enough troops to defend Kharkov. Yeah. What troops they did have, they pulled back immediately to these defensive lines east of the Oskol River. Was Lyman ever supposed to be a frontline defensive line? I don't think so. I don't think that they prepared it. I don't think they had the men, the time, the interest of even defending this place like that. What they will do is create a defensive line that will ultimately stop Ukraine. Yeah. And then eventually they will get it back. I think if they could have, if they could wave a magic wand and stop Ukraine at Lyman, they would have. But this is reality. They don't have the men, the equipment to do it right now. They're spread thin. Everyone knows this. This is why they're doing the mobilization. Now, wherever Russia has built up defenses, Ukraine, no matter what they throw at it, cannot get through. It's like a meat grinder. When these 300,000 start coming into Ukraine or these regions that are now considered Russia, they're going to have these defenses set up across the entire line. And Ukraine is not going to get another chance at that. So they should be saving these reserves that they built up, and instead they're wasting them just for political points before winter, and they're going to lose all of this. What are they going to do when these 300,000 troops start showing up and making a difference on the battlefield? There's no weapons that the West can send them that's going to give them some sort of advantage. They have everything that they were going to get, and this is what they did with it against 150,000 Russian troops. In short time, it'll be 450,000 troops. What are they going to do then?
No, I don't see the rationale of what the Zelensky regime is doing. And Brian, you're more on top of the numbers, but it seems that they have thrown everything that they had, scraped up the very bottom of the barrel, pulled troops from other fronts to throw them all at Lyman. And even if they win Lyman, it's a Pyrrhic victory. I mean, it seems like the textbook definition of a Pyrrhic victory, because they will be so weakened that once the Russian surge, to call it, to coin a term, arrives on the battlefield, they'll be too weak to stop any strong, coordinated maneuver warfare type operation. Would that be an accurate assessment?
That would. Just think the defenses around Kherson, even considering the issues they were having with the bridges, that was the largest offensive Ukraine launched out of the between Kherson and Kharkov. Kherson was the larger offensive, and they are still throwing men and machines into that front, and they're not gaining any territory. They're getting like these villages right at the very fringe of Russian held territory. And even then, sometimes they will lose them. They're not making any progress, but they're losing huge amounts of men and equipment. Now, the thing is, toward Lyman, it's very slow. I mean, they've been at it for a week or more. I wasn't really paying that much attention over the last week, but it seems like days or weeks they've been trying to fight and take Lyman. And they're making this very slow incremental progress, sort of like how they always said Russia was making this slow incremental progress. But when Russia is doing it, they're using their long-range fires. Ukraine is doing it by just sending men and trucks and whatever tanks they have left right into the teeth of Russian defenses, and it's very
human waves.
and it's under
human
defended.
waves.
Yeah, and Liman's very under defended, and they still managed to hold out this long. And you will see videos where it's just like Ukrainians are driving down the road, and there's just destroyed Ukrainian equipment on both sides on fire, and the guy's like trying to point his camera somewhere where it's not on the camera, but it's everywhere on their way to Liman. And this is what they're doing. And if you even read Western accounts, this is what they admit they're doing in Kherson. I just read that New York Times article, kind of a follow-up of the Washington Post one, talking about how big the losses are at Kherson. It's just unbelievable. And they're admitting it. And they're admitting that Kharkov was a success because there was no one there, basically. So what does that tell you about the future? A future where there's going to be 300,000 extra Russian troops in these areas. What does that tell you about the future? It seems like a very obvious implication.
Yeah. I mean, the numbers have been something like 500. I've heard anywhere from 500 to 2,000 Russian troops there. I tend to believe the 500 number. I think that's accurate.
At Lyman?
Going up against 6,000 to 12,000.
Yeah, I heard something like that.
Whichever way you look at it, you're still looking at a very small Russian side compared to a vastly outnumbered or Ukrainian side that outnumbers the Russians. And I just think the order for Krasny Liman was hold on until we get all the referenda and everything done and out of the way. Hold on, because the order from Zelensky was we got to take Lyman at all costs before the big speech and the referendum. And that was the order. And then he changed it. And then from what I understand, it was changed. It wasn't we got to take Lyman. We just got to encircle it because they knew they weren't going to take it before yesterday, the day before. And so those rushes, I mean, it is, I don't want to, make it too cinematic, but it is kind of like a 300 type of story. They held on. And from what I understand, this is what last I read, they're going to get out. I don't know. They're going to pull back, but they held on and they kept, and Ukraine lost a lot of men, a lot of machine. And now the Russians, like Brian said, they're just going to fall back and everything changes in 2-3 days, October 4th or 5th. Everything changes. So it's just like reboot the computer. Just going to, boom, we're going to reboot it and everything changes because now you're looking at the full might of the Russian military. So I think the Russians, for the most part, got what they wanted out of Krasny Liman. And Ukraine's going to get something very short term. They're going to get the media. They're going to get the spin. Maybe they're going to get some more billions from the Biden White House. Maybe the EU will scrape up another $1 billion or $2 billion. Maybe they'll be able to stop people coming out on the streets in Europe just for like another week or two because look, it's working. It's working. We took Kharkov and now we took Liman, this very important village of 0 inhabitants. Right? This is, they're hoping to just give us another 2-3 weeks until we figure out what the hell we're going to do.
2 weeks to flatten the curve.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, think about it too. Look how much territory they took when they started the Kharkov offensive. And then once they reached anywhere where Russian and Russian-backed forces were standing and fighting, it ground to a near halt. And then they were making these very costly incremental gains. And then again, I keep comparing this to the Ardennes offensive because, okay, there's a lot of differences. The point that the reason I'm comparing them is because Germany took this, they had a reserve. They could have used it for anything. They decided to throw it into some offensive that was making gains at first, and then it collapsed, and then they had no reserve, and they were still losing. They did not address the fundamental reasons for why they were losing. Ukraine has not addressed the fundamental reasons they have been losing this whole time. And people, saying, well, look what they did in Kharkov and now Liman. And then they try to, like an analogy by comparison, they're like going to say that they're going to translate that to the rest of the battlefield. No, it doesn't. It's because they were so undermanned and unprepared and not protecting that part of the map. That's why they were able to go over. I mean, Kharkov especially. And then Liman underdefended and is still held out this long. again, when Russia decides to defend an area, Ukraine is not going to get through. And now they're depleted on top of it all. They don't have that reserve left anymore. I heard, I can't confirm this, that they were pulling, they had a reserve for these offensives. Now they're pulling reserves from places like Kiev, troops that are supposed to be protecting Kiev, to go fight on these fronts because they're running low. And as I keep saying, you can keep pressing young men into service, but if they don't have training, they're going to go on the battlefield ineffective. Doesn't matter what equipment you hand them. It takes time to create trained manpower, time that Ukraine does not have.
Yeah, the other thing I'm hearing is, as I understand in Belarus, they're setting up infrastructure to hold 100,000 Russian troops, which I think is pretty interesting because it could potentially be used to threaten and potentially invade northern Ukraine, and also act as a shield insofar as Poland is concerned. And I think that particular front, the Belarusian front, how can I put it? At this time, it seems so far-fetched, but it could be that might be the next flashpoint of this global conflict. Because I think that you both would agree with me that we're in a global conflict. I mean, this really is World War III, because masks are off. Any kind of notion that we're doing anything other than having a war of the U.S. NATO against Russia, China. Even though the part with China has not started yet, at least kinetically, it seems that that's the direction of travel insofar as this whole conflict is concerned. That Belarus might be the next flashpoint. Odd as that may sound, do you guys agree, or you think that 100,000, the infrastructure for 100,000 troops is like not a non-issue at this point? Brian,
Alex. Well, okay. I didn't hear that report. I'll have to look into it. But I mean, they were already trying to overthrow Belarus before all of this started.
In 2020.
That, again, the RAND 2019 document extending Russia, they talked about this. They talked about pretty much every one of Russia's neighbors was in for some trouble. And we saw them step by step in trying to implement this. The NED got caught red-handed, openly talking about how they were going to overthrow the government in Belarus and install a client regime there, and they were trying to do the same thing in Russia. They got caught on tape and on camera talking about this. So that was always a target. I think Belarus understands that. Maybe there still is some friction between Belarus and Russia, but I think they understand self-interest, self-preservation at this point. You need to move past whatever those differences are. And I mean, Russia has had a lot of military equipment stationed, staged in Belarus throughout the duration of this operation and beforehand. So I don't know. We just have to see. I mean, it's a very strategic location. I mean, it's just north of Kiev, so it would make sense. Yeah, I gotta look into that report and see what there is to it. I mean, maybe there's something to it.
Alex, you hear about that?
I didn't hear about it, so I have to look into it. But I would imagine for the time being that Russia doesn't want to involve anybody else in this. I don't think they want anyone else involved, at least overtly involved. So I would say that short term, for the time being, I mean, things could change tomorrow.
Sure.
But for the time being, I would imagine that Russia is just saying, look, we've got this. And they do. And so I would say that they don't want anyone else involved. That doesn't only hold for Belarus, it holds for other CSTO or CIS countries. They don't.
No,
they don't
I wasn't saying that they were going to use Belarusian troops, but rather that the Russian army was a stage in Belarus.
Yeah, even that, I would imagine. This is just my guess. I would imagine they're probably not going to do that for the time being. But like I said, that could change. Everything could change. For now, I think the Russians are going to focus a beeline towards Odessa. If I had to take a guess.
Turning a little bit. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I mean, like, I never heard President Putin say he was going to take Odessa, but I mean, this is something that I have been saying
it's
since the beginning too. It's like, go
come
Odessa.
on.
Yeah, and landlocked. Well, I'm just pointing out that they never said that, but it looks obvious. I mean, I've been saying it too, that they for sure are going to take Odessa, and if NATO were to intervene and create a buffer zone, I think they would be very interested in grabbing Odessa as part of that buffer zone, knowing full well that if they don't, then whatever is left of Ukraine is going to be landlocked, and a burden forever for whoever is, Europe, whatever's left of Europe. So I think it would make sense for Odessa to be next, Nikolaev, and then Odessa. It would make a lot of sense. And look at how many Russian forces are involved around Kherson right now. And, Ukraine cannot continue this forever, throwing column after column of armored vehicles into Russian defenses down there. When it stops, what do you think is going to happen next? Russia is going to be able to make significant advances. So that it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, my thinking at this point is that it would be Nikolaev, Odessa, and then Kharkov City. That would be the order of the Russians insofar as any actual invasion and capture of territory. Insofar as threatening the northern border of Ukraine, it would just be like pin down whatever remaining troops Ukraine has. But if it's true that it would be Nikolaev, Odessa, and then Kharkov, and I'm located in Kharkov City, I'm figuring that by the time that actually happens, the Zelensky regime forces will have collapsed. I cannot see this conflict lasting that long. There are simply not enough men, let alone trained men. I mean, just men of fighting age between 16 and 50. There aren't enough, and so the notion that it'll go that long, I don't know. I mean, some people have smart people have said that they think that this is going to be a forever war, but my thinking is that there is going to be a moment of collapse of just that the Zelensky regime just doesn't have anything else. It's over, and I don't know. I mean, Alex, I saw you nodding your head.
No, I agree with you. I think that this is not a forever war because Ukraine is not a civilizational state.
No,
it's been put together, and so that which has been put together can easily be taken apart. So, I think that once Zelensky's political capital starts to hit zero, which it probably is approaching that, and once the EU they just can't go anymore, which we're approaching that as well. And you have midterms in the US and you have all these things that are going to be changing in about a month or two. It's going to run its course. And I think the Russians know this as well. No one even talks about the economic situation in Ukraine. I mean, there's.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah,
I've never heard them. I haven't even seen an article about, and you'd think that they would have.
No one can keep on paying, the Zelensky government $8 billion, $10 billion every single month. It's going to stop. Once it stops, people don't get paid, soldiers don't get paid, government officials don't get paid. I mean, everything just starts to grind to a halt. That's why this is not a forever war, in my opinion. I don't see it as that. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna head out. I'm gonna jump out now, and
you're gonna go and fry in the
I've got a bunch of videos now that I need to start getting up.
Yes, please. I've been while I was feeling sick, and I was keeping on top of things by watching your videos, you and Alexander's videos. So
keep
up the great work.
Yes, it's fantastic, Alex. I mean, I can't say that enough. Your walk and talk videos are just superb. So thanks so much for stopping by.
It's not as easy.
No, it's not damn hard. I've tried it. I tried it when I started my YouTubing back in 2017. It is hard, and what happened to me is I feel so self-conscious. When I'm walking around with the camera, talking to a camera, and people are like staring at me, like, "What the hell is wrong with that guy?" I mean, it makes me at least extremely self-conscious.
I mean, you're a director, you're a film expert, Gonzalo. There's a lot of elements. There's a lot of elements that you never think about until you do it. The wind, the bugs, the heat, I mean, there's so many different elements that you just don't think
you start
about.
sweating. Yeah.
Well, everything happens. All these things hit you, and you're like, I didn't expect this. Even just like the wind blowing very, very heavily. You're like, I didn't expect this. What am I going to do in post? Do I have to go somewhere else? Do I have to? Yeah, there's all kinds of different elements that when you're in a studio, it's okay. Everything is controlled.
It's completely controlled and very easy. And yeah, you start knocking them out lickety split. But yeah, on the street, and anything can happen. And by the way, I love it when sometimes some random stranger will congratulate you right when you're doing a video. I've seen that a couple of times. It's really funny.
A couple,
really flattering. Yeah.
Well, in Cyprus, it rarely happens. In Cyprus, it rarely happens. Anyway, I'm gonna head out, guys. Brian,
all right.
Thank you once again. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Take it easy, man.
Okay.
And that was Alex Christoforu, and you should check him out on the Duran and his own channel. After the show, I'll put links to everybody's addresses and stuff like that. So anyway, Brian, have you been following American politics?
Not really, but I just wanted to add one. Well,
Sure.
a little bit. One thing I just wanted to add on about this being a forever war. A lot of people say, oh, the Ukrainian offensive was like the Tet offensive. This is like Vietnam. The Vietnamese would never give up. And it's nothing like that, because Ukraine used to be part of Russia. This is not an army traveling to the other side of the planet, dealing with a culture, a language that is completely different from their own. There's no historical ties between the two. This is Russia in a place that used to be part of Russia and also part of the Soviet Union.
And it's full of Russians.
Exactly. And they speak Russian. They can read the signs. So this is not the same. And something similar happened with Chechnya, which was also a US-backed proxy conflict. And look how that turned out. And people were saying that was going to last forever also. And it didn't. So people should keep that in mind, I think, when hearing that claim.
No, I don't put any stock in those analogies because of the issues that you raised. And of course, the other thing that people don't seem to realize or don't want to accept is that the Zelensky regime and the Poroshenko regime before it treated the people here in eastern and southern Ukraine like dirt. Okay, yeah. I mean, quite apart from the shelling of the city of Donetsk that happened on a daily basis, or weekly basis, at some of the low points of the shelling, there was the anti-Russian language stuff. I mean, like you'd go to the McDonald's, for instance, and here in Kharkov, the city of Kharkov is traditionally Russian. Everybody speaks Russian. Relatively few people, not a majority, speak Ukrainian. And they speak it, from what I understand from people who know, they speak it a bit like a foreign language. And they were obliged at the McDonald's to take your order in Ukrainian. And everybody, it would always be the same, because I went with a couple of people, on the drive-through. And I was explaining this because I personally cannot tell the difference between Ukrainian and Russian. And that's part of the reason I've had such a hard time learning Russian or Ukrainian for that matter, because they mix it up and I don't know which is which. And so it's just a mishmash to me. And so I can't get a latch on it, get a handle on it. But anyway, I was told that, at the drive-through, I went one time with one of my squash partners, play 90 minutes of squash and then go straight to the McDonald's, right? So
very counterproductive.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a payment for the
okay, yeah,
yeah. And so he told me that the girl from the speaker, right, started speaking in Ukrainian, and he just immediately started in Russian, and she started answering all in Russian. But it was like the policy that you have to speak in Ukrainian, and the people who were ethnically Russian were mistreated. That's not Russian propaganda, or no, it was true.
Yeah,
and they look at Russians, not the Russian soldiers, but the native Russians of eastern and southern Ukraine. They look at them like subhumans. They don't take them seriously. Did you see that picture? I'm still having not nightmares about it, but I still am horrified by it, of that Zelensky regime soldier stewing a human head?
Yeah.
You saw that?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. This is what Alex was just saying before he left. That it's a construction. It's a nation that was constructed. It is not. It's not. You know, it has always been part of Russia. This thing where it's Ukraine. This is a recent thing, and they have to go out of their way. They have to go out of their way to remind you that they're Ukrainian and not Russian. So there's a lot of things that they do very deliberately to try to distinguish themselves. And ironically, they're hijacking, you know, stuff from, can we say the four-lettered N-word from World War II on your channel, Gonzalo?
Well, I don't mind, but I don't know if I'm going to get into trouble for it. So,
I don't want to get your channel in trouble. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Well, a certain ideology from World War II. I mean, this is a failed ideology that destroyed the country that it developed in almost to the last brick. And, you know, they're using elements of that. It's just toxic. It's toxic. And this is what the U.S. does all around the world. They have constructs, a blend of, you know, something that was actually historic mixed with these things that get hijacked from elsewhere. And yeah, that's what you get. You get a society like that that's going to stew ahead in a pot. You're going to get people like that who tattoo these things on their bodies. Who
they
just
really do. They really do. It's the thing that people don't seem to understand. The West, it's not Russian propaganda, or how can I put it? There's no question that the Russians use some of this for PR advantage. No question. But that doesn't automatically make it a lie, okay? I mean, you know, if some, you know, if Genghis Khan says that the sky is blue, you might hate Genghis Khan, but it's still blue, you know? He's not making it up, you know? And so that's the thing that people don't seem to understand, that these stories are true. I personally, I am Chilean. I identify as Chilean, though I've been thinking of identifying as Puerto Rican. But, you know, I still, you know, I'm transitioning. But the serious point is that I don't have any horse in this race. I don't have a dog in the fight. My only concern is to minimize the loss of human life and the destruction of the country. Because, I mean, I am fortunate enough that I could live anywhere. And I choose to live here because I think it's a lovely country. It's just relaxing. It's just, I like it, period. And that's why I'm living here. And so I don't want to see it destroyed. And so, of course, I want a ceasefire, some sort of peace agreement as quickly as possible. But at the same time, I look at the Zelensky regime and they lie all the time. Everything that they say is a lie. And it's consistent. At first, you know, when I heard the Ghost of Kiev story, right, I was like, this is not possible, you know. And I remember in my naivete at the time when this first broke out, I thought no government, no responsible government would say something so foolish, but they would. They did. They
were just getting started. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and that's the thing that I have to admit that I am most surprised by, is how the leadership classes of the West, not just the Zelensky regime, but the Europeans and the Americans, they lie so blatantly. And oh my goodness, it's Angelo Giuliano. How's it going, my friend?
Guys, great. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah,
yes.
I hear you fine.
Yes, welcome.
How's it going?
Yeah, let's see.
Hello,
can you hear us?
Oh, barely.
Okay, why don't you do something? Why don't you hop off and hop back on? Just close the window and start it again.
And also maybe try taking the headphone
I don't
out
know
and
why
back in.
the sound is not too good.
No.
Let me maybe exit and enter again. 1 second.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens sometimes on this platform. That people hop on.
No, and sometimes you know, you don't usually use the headphones when you're using your computer, but you use it for something like this, and for some reason the computer doesn't acknowledge that the headphones are in or something. Can you hear us now?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
I was hearing, you know, I just jumped in, I was listening. You talked about identity. What do you identify yourself with, Gonzalo? Are you a lizard? Are you
No. I'm not that level. I'm not that high. I currently identify myself as a disabled lesbian of color. That's what I identify myself as right now. And wait. Now I identify as a cis-normative Latinx male.
I don't even know what you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
You're not following the whole culture bullshit of
the thing is, like, it's designed specifically to suck everybody in. That's what it's for. It's to suck everybody in and get them chasing their tails so that they never realize what's really going on, what they have to do to fix it. And once you put even a toe in, just to test the temperature, it's just going to suck you in like a black hole. And so it's just better to, like, I'm aware of what's going on, and that there's this crazy thing where they're not even what is it, defining what a man or a woman is. And it's high, it's divisive. Be a
biologist.
Well, I mean, look, are we a rational scientific civilization or not? Its gender is determined by chromosomes. It's very simple. It's scientifically testable, and everything else is just a construct inside someone's head. And I understand that people have issues for whatever reason, and we shouldn't go beat them up or make a problem for them. But like, your personal life should be your personal. It's so simple. Like, here in Thailand, is very simple. Live and let live. Your private life should stay private. When you're out in public, just take everybody else into consideration. And things work really well when you do that. And Thai people are very tolerant of a lot of stuff. This idea where you're going to force your beliefs on everyone else, that is not okay. And it's just amazing how everything works so well here in that sense. But you also see the U.S. government funding these opposition groups to inject this toxic identity politics into Thailand and try to get the vortex spinning.
Yeah, somebody in chat said very aptly, distract, divide, conquer.
Yes.
Can I add one thing, Gonzalo? I think we should even actually go further and look at labels. The ism, just to give you an example, like communist, fascist, I mean, whatever. We are putting people into boxes, and basically when they say, oh, you are MAGA, and what should be a MAGA like? Then you are communist, oh, you're leftist, and so on. And actually, this is completely a trap. This is why, there's a Jackson Hinkle, he had this initiative, and I think that the idea is good. It's, you want to, it's anti-system, it's anti-elites, and then you put the MAGA and the communists together and so on. But, actually, the root of the problem is the labels. Because we have to look for what a common ground, what unites us, and set aside the differences. So in reality, you see, we jump into the trap of saying, oh, I am a MAGA, oh, I am something. And I actually refuse to go into this game to say, oh, to define myself. Because you see, it starts with politics, then it goes into gender and so on. So it's a multiple divide in all fronts. And then you'll have like socialists that will say, oh no, I'm socialist conservative. Then you put another box.
Yeah.
Worse than that, I think what those people should do is actually going into the roots. The root is the rule of the game. Why nobody talks about the rule of the game? You know that whoever writes the rule of the game controls the outcome of the game. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but that's the whole point of the rules-based international order. Get with the program, Angelo.
They're writing the rules.
They write the rules on an ongoing basis so that they always wind up winning. Heads I win, tails you lose kind of situation.
No, exactly. It's so sometimes everything when it comes to politics, and you see every single country, if people don't really dig into the rules, they don't. You don't realize that you can have a third party in the U.S. You know what? the rules are truncated. And then it's about people just understanding what is a democracy. I mean, really, why don't people sit down and really say, okay, you know, all those nice words, what is the democracy? You know, I mean, you know, it's power to the people.
I'm still here.
But, you know, there are more implications to that. You know, power to the people. Yes, so what? What does it mean? No money into politics. You know, foundation, sovereignty. You know, why don't we never talk about sovereignty? You know, we had this discussion with Brian, right? Many times we said the foundation of democracy is sovereignty because it's a process of self-determination. So you see, people don't get the basic knowledge about what is democracy. Even
I mean, like what happened with the referendums, that you know, the people decided that they wanted to join Russia. Okay, and all the observers have said it was fair and square. And by the way, a lot of people were saying that, oh, you saw soldiers going into apartment complexes with guns, right? Well, no, because I mean, the story of that, for those of you in chat who don't know, and I know that you guys know, is that the rules apparently of the referendum were for disabled and elderly people who couldn't make it to polling stations. They would take the voting box to them, and of course, the box with the votes had to be guarded, and that's why the soldiers went with the box. But it wasn't to, you know, stick a AK-74, whatever weapon they're using, and stick it in Granny's face and say, "Okay, babushka, vote the right way." No, it wasn't that at all. You know, but they're characterizing it like that. But anyway, the more important point of what you were saying, Angelo, is that the West accepts people's desire for sovereignty if it goes their way, and if it doesn't go their way, then it's, you know, staged, it's not valid, it's whatever. Again, heads I win, tails you lose kind of approach to things.
Yeah. Yes, please, Brian. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, Angelo and I, we talk about this all the time, especially about Taiwan, which is very misunderstood because the Western media lies about it across the board. They're supposedly a democracy, but nothing that is going on in Taipei represents the best interests of the people there. Exactly like in the EU, how the leadership now in the EU do not represent the best interests of the European people. Even if there are elections taking place, even if you can convince people that this is what they want, you can plainly see, an outsider looking in can clearly see that this is not serving their best interests. So it's an acknowledgement of this flaw in human nature, that you can convince someone to go off the edge of a cliff. And this is a fatal flaw of, you know, this democracy. This goes back to Angelo saying sovereignty, your ability to know what are your best interests and your ability to determine where you go. This is the most important pillar of actual democracy, of self-determination.
Yeah, I think there's a very good example. Europe, how they created Europe, and actually how the elected people around Europe, every single country, those elected officials, they transfer the power to Brussels without bypassing the will of people. Yeah. You know, in France, in 2005, they voted for the Maastricht, you know, constitution, and people voted against. They voted against. What they did is 2 years later, Sarkozy, he did the Treaty of Lisbon, and he actually changed just a few words, and he imposed on French people this new constitution, which was, it's illegal because you are elected, but when you are elected, you are not supposed to transfer the power to Brussels, and that's what they did. So in reality, I even right now, I refuse to talk about single country elections or politics in Europe. Why? Because the decisions are made in Brussels.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you know what you can decide? Very small stuff. The most relevant things are done in Brussels. It's gone. And actually, they've replicated a model that you have in the States. You know, you have in Brussels, from one politician, you have maybe 7 lobbyists. Yeah. So those lobbyists are listening. You know, those politicians are listening to the lobbyists. You know, you've replicated that, you know, and the project is actually of EU. It's very clear. It's destruction of nation states. So they are going to split by regions. those regions, they will refer directly to Brussels, and slowly they will dissolute completely nation state. And reminding people,
No, into this issue of destroying the European nation states. Some people, I never took this seriously, but lately I've been thinking that maybe it's true, which is the following, that the real reason they deposed Gaddafi was because, as Gaddafi himself said, Libya and his regime were the stopper for all the migrants going to Europe. And, they removed him in 2012. And what did we get over the next 3 years, 4 years? This enormous wave of migrants from sub-Saharan Africa. And I always thought that it was, if not a conspiracy theory, it was sort of like stretching it, that they removed Gaddafi specifically to unstopper the African bottle of migrants. But now I'm not so sure. I mean, especially with the blatant destruction of Nord Stream, that it just shows that they are willing to, that they want to destroy Europe. And so I'm wondering to myself if maybe that quote conspiracy theory might actually be true. What do you guys think of it?
I think it's good you mentioned immigration. I'm personally, I come from the immigration. My parents, they suffered, through immigration. It's not, being expat is one thing. You're willing to go to a certain country. It's different status. When you're an immigrant, it's either politically related, related to war, or it's economically. What happened with immigration, especially when it comes to Europe, and believe me, I'm for people mixing. I'm very open-minded for that. But the purpose here, it's mixing. I mean, one thing is you have those immigrants that are actually going to be slave laborers. They're actually going to put pressure on existing labor all around Europe. And by the way, the first actually to be against immigration in Europe were the communists. People don't know that, but Georges Marchais in France in the 80s, before the far right, he was the first one to understand that you have imported immigration. This is going to benefit the big corporation, because now you have immigrants that are willing to work for half the price. Yeah. They are going to work at very lower conditions. It's going to put pressure on prices, and basically, so you see, it's very counterintuitive. I say I'm against this illegal immigration, but in reality, you know what? Because I look at the source, why do those people immigrate? It's because we actually raping the global South. Yeah. And what we want to do by having all this immigration from Africa, from all around the world into Europe, it's part of the project of destruction of nation states. The same as in the US. I think there's a purpose, somehow it's a bit different, but in reality, there's a political element behind that, put pressure on the prices, you put the wages low, and then at the same time, I think the Democrats have they had their plan there. Yeah, I mean, they were assuming that those people, they would vote Democrat, and they facilitated also that immigration. But that's a local thing, but I think we need to be really careful. There's why George Soros is actually financing this illegal immigration. They provide boats, Yeah. But when you talk like this, they're like, oh, you know what, you're far right. And actually they don't realize that the first people in Europe that realized the scam were the communists. They saw that, but those communists were the real communists. I'm not talking about, the communists that were hijacked by actually,
by neoliberals,
the left has been exactly the left. Actually, the treason came from the left. The right has been consistent all along, but the left was actually hijacked.
Yeah, because from the communist point of view, it makes sense that you would be opposed to mass migration of a foreign people, because you wouldn't be able to convince them of communism to join your ranks. And it would undercut your position enough. And so forget about the issue of ideals and principles and that, and just looking at it from a purely pragmatic political level. The communists would be the first to be against it. What, Brian?
Well, the U.S. weaponizes immigration or migrants or refugees. They do it everywhere. They do it inside their own country. They could easily let everyone from Mexico in. As legal, like make it extremely easy to become illegally an American. They could do that. They don't want to because it's another one of these things that divides everyone. It puts pressure on ordinary people. It's another distraction. You're not able to pool your resources. You're not able to compete. This is what they do. It's all about eliminating competition within, beyond, among their allies, among their adversaries. I see them do it in Southeast Asia, where they create these conflicts. They know it's going to create refugees. And then they use that as a political weapon to pressure other countries to get on board with their agenda, or they're going to flood them with these refugees, which does seriously tax and destabilize wherever they're going. It's not that you're against the people coming in. It's the fact that it is destabilizing. You had no part in this. Why is your country now in Europe? It's a different story because everyone in Europe was involved one way or another. In Libya, in Syria, in Iraq, they were all playing a role, and now they've created this. Like, what did you think was going to happen when you destroyed all these countries? And you're constantly knocking over everything in Africa every time they build something. They're going to come to where things are not on fire for the time being. And then also, if you want that to stop, like Angelo said, stop destroying their country. Start building them up. When China builds infrastructure in another country, the people in that country are going to use the infrastructure there. They're not going to come to China. This is common sense.
Yeah, there's also another aspect that I've been wondering about, an aspect of psychology. There seems, especially in Europe, to be an element of self-loathing, of just hating who you are. And I'm wondering at the origins of that. I mean, because I had a deeply disturbing conversation recently with a German acquaintance, a guy who's fairly capable, ethnic German, and he for the life of me, I can't recall the exact words that he used, but basically I was saying, Europe is going to go down the toilet, and all these problems and all the rest, and he was saying, well, maybe we deserve to be wiped out. He didn't say those words exactly, but that was the sense that he was giving me. And I was shocked. I mean, the notion that you kind of like hate your own people so much that you will be almost indifferent to its annihilation. I find it just deeply, deeply bizarre. And people might say, oh, it's Germans, and because of all the guilt tripping that has happened to the German people in the last 75 years, that because of it, they hate themselves. They have self-loathing such that they are okay with the fact that Germans will disappear. And if you look at a demographic chart, ethnic Germans will disappear within the next 100 years or so. And it's kind of shocking because you start looking at the population projections. They're simply not having babies. They're just simply not reproducing themselves as a healthy people ought to. And I just wonder at the psychology of the people who hate themselves so much that they're okay. I don't understand it.
Well, yeah, I mean, no, go ahead, Angelo.
Well, sorry, but I think it's interesting to see those. I feel myself, I'm a citizen of the world. I mean, really, I mean, it's true. It's just because, I've been traveling all my life.
All of us, we're all like
exactly.
That. We're a tiny minority. I mean, like microscopic guys like us who globetrot around the world and stuff like that. But I'm sorry, Angela, I
find it interesting that, you have people like anti-imperialistic. They tend to be like really like, they look at patriotism and love of the country to be something evil, to be something, racist, chauvinistic, and so on. And actually, I don't agree with that. I think we need to build up from the ground and the local level. And countries need to, what the MAGA is right about is about, you need to work on your country. Stop, just focus on the people and start to bring tangible results in your countries locally. And you know what? People that can travel, people that can say, I don't like this space and I leave. That's a luxury. It's a luxury that I have, that the three of us have. But you know what? 90% of the people don't have that. So the only choice they have is that to love where they live. I mean, you are going to live your whole life in one place and hate that place. That's so unhealthy, extremely unhealthy. So I think we should respect people that love their country. Patriotism is not nationalism. They associate this to Nazis, and I think this is sometimes like those. It comes from the anti-imperialistic. Actually, it's so funny. And I think it shouldn't be like this. I think it's healthy.
You know what I noticed is that I follow a number of YouTube channels that are of Russians in Russia reporting on what they have seen about different things, and they live in different places in Moscow, in the Far East, and in other cities. And 3 of these channels they left because these channels are obviously in the English language. And of the 4 channels that I follow regularly, 3 of them left within the last week after mobilization. And it got me to thinking that, in a weird way, this has actually made Vladimir Putin's life a lot easier, because of the number of Russians who have left post-mobilization, right? If I had to guess, in the hundreds of thousands, I would guess less than 500,000, but more than 100,000. The precise number, I don't know, but it's not really relevant. The point is that, see, all the people who left are obviously not on board with what the Kremlin is carrying out. And by the way, whenever we talk about Putin is doing this or Putin is doing that, I always think, no, it's not Putin just deciding on his own. It's this whole class of functionaries who are not just in the Kremlin. They're spread out throughout the government of Russia, and they're all on board. And so my thinking is that all these people who have left, paradoxically, will do 2 things. Number one, it solidifies support within Russia for what the Kremlin is doing, number one. And number 2, paradoxically, all of these Russians who are fleeing, they're fleeing, most of them, interestingly enough, to Georgia, to Tajikistan. I mean, they're not going to Western Europe because they can't go there. And so they are going to bring their Russian their Russian points of view to these nations and Russify them in spite of themselves. Because if you think about it, who leaves a country? Who emigrates? People who are a little bit more energetic, a little bit more ambitious, a little bit more discontent, perhaps, but they have more energy, and they are going to go to whatever country they're going to, and they are going to stir the pot naturally because they are more capable people. The more capable people leave rather. The less capable, the lazier, whatever you want to call them, they're just like, well, this happened, so, well, what you going to do? And just keep on going with their day. And so my thinking is that paradoxically, for these 2 reasons, that they left Russia and giving the Kremlin more political punch, more political agreement within the population, and the fact that these Russians are moving to these other countries are going to Russify them, this is all going the Kremlin's way. I mean, I don't see a weak point insofar as Russia is concerned at this time. I mean, is there any flank that you can think of that is not going the Kremlin's way at this time in this conflict? I mean, this is a serious question. Brian?
I would say that if they could have, I think they would have tried to avoid losing Kharkov, and now Lyman looks like it's in big trouble. If not,
sure,
I think they would have avoided that. But in the grand scheme of things, I think this is temporary and minor. But another thing I would say is that if they could have picked, they would have picked not to have had any of this happen in the first place. They did not build the Nord Stream 2 pipeline knowing that eventually it would get blown up. They wanted to work with Europe. If you think about it, we're talking about the calamity that's waiting for Europe this winter and beyond. Do you remember before all of this started that, how optimistic things seemed? Germany working with Russia, the rest of Europe, talking about getting involved. There were European countries signing One Belt, One Road initiative for projects. Mm-hmm. And it all looked like, hey, that they're finally going to fulfill their full potential. Europe has a lot of potential, and it is being held back by being America's imperial lackey. That is a fact. And they were slipping out from under this. But now look at it. So I think if Russia could have, they would have avoided that. Now, if you're talking about, is everything going their way in terms of the way they're reacting to the inevitability of this going this way, I would say things are mostly going their way.
Yeah, because
I can't think of anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, post-conflict, yeah, they had that scare insofar as their currency in March, but that petered out, and now it's stronger than ever. It's actually the strongest currency in the world at this point. And literally, I mean, it's the only currency that has been substantially appreciating against all the other currencies on the planet. Second only to the dollar. I mean, topping the dollar. The dollar is also increasing strength because people are leaving their local currencies. And there's a big kerfuffle about to happen in China, which actually I wanted to talk to you about that, Brian. I mean, and Angelo, because you guys are on top of that. What the hell's going on in China? It seems that they're headed to some sort of financial crisis. Is that accurate? I mean, I haven't been on top of the news from China, and so that's why I'd love to have your opinion about it or your ideas. Angelo?
You understand? Well, we had this discussion with Brian. You know, it's you have an author called Gordon Chang, and he wrote a book 20 years ago, the coming downfall of China. You know, it's every month you have articles. Oh, you know, there's actually a channel. There's a very interesting channel. It's been, I think he started 2-3 years ago, and you see he's doing like a video every 2-3 days. But it's like for 3 years nothing was right with China. Well, Gordon Chang was the same, you know, and actually did some update about his book, but he's wrong. You know, I mean, he's completely wrong. We need to look at long-term trends. You know, for example, there was a bank, I think it was in Hunan. It was a local bank, you know, and they had problems of solvency. But this happens, you know, China is not even a country. It's a continent.
Yeah.
The size of China. So we're talking about one bank. One. You know, just look at figures, the fundamentals. You know, this year, China trade surplus, we are talking about close to $1 trillion. $1 trillion.
Yeah,
now,
you can do a lot with that.
Yeah, now the currency actually in 1 year has depreciated by 10%, meaning that they are more competitive. Additional to that, you have Europe that is buying expensive energy, oil and gas. China is buying that at the discount. What will happen? You know, Europe is going to be desindustrialized, and those industries, heavy industries, are going to move either to the US or China. You know, the trade surplus is going to be bigger and bigger. It's massive what they're accumulating in trade surplus. You know, China right now is extremely competitive. I actually have some project trading, sourcing from China. You know, in some products, the price hasn't changed. You know, injection plastic, we do some project in injection plastic, hasn't changed in 10 years. Imagine the cumulative inflation, you know, I mean, it has increased everywhere. We are buying product in China wholesale, you know, direct from the factory. 10 years, they haven't changed the price. It's extremely competitive. So you see, we need to look at figures, and the same as you know, I look at this in Ukraine, the same. You know, we also talked about this with Brian. It's not about, you know, today, tomorrow, what happened, and so on. You know, you take 100 kilometers, you know, it's about looking at fundamentals. Fundamentals, really. Has the fundamentals changed in Ukraine? Ukraine was losing, and you know what? It's still losing. Maybe more. Even maybe more. Just the metrics, the benchmark is different. So we look at China, we look at what is happening in Ukraine. Fundamentals, just simple as that. Same as when you look at the stock market, you know, you pick a stock, you look at its fundamentals. You know, is it solid? You know, solvency, and the risk profile. Is it volatile? You know, and what was the trend in the last 10 years? Now look at China, the trend the last 20 years. And actually, they're talking about the crisis in China because it dropped from a double-digit growth to 7%. I mean, this is a soft landing, you know. It's very healthy. But there wasn't any recession. You know, it wasn't any recession in the last, 30, 40 years. You know.
And they're talking about, you know, I think it's centered around real estate. This other thing they're talking about, But you have to think about the entire Chinese economy. It's not just service and real estate. They have huge amounts of industry, which is real. It's real economic activity, tangible, that you can touch.
Yeah.
It's not numbers in a ledger. They have all of this.
It's not
at the core of their economy.
It's not fire crap,
Yeah,
finance, insurance, real estate garbage. Well, the real estate, that's part of it.
Yeah. And so when you look at the whole thing, and as the Chinese president even said, their economy is an ocean. It's not a pond. It takes a lot to change the course of an entire ocean. So you have a bubble in one sector, it's not going to crumble the entire economy. And just like Angelo has said, I mean, it's been well over a month now since I heard all of these videos come out saying China's economy is going to collapse in a month. And so what happened? Where
the British economy collapsed.
Yeah.
And the German economy is about to. Yeah. I mean, because they took a beating insofar as the equities markets after the Nord Stream 2 thing. I get your point. Basically, it's scaremongering from the West. It's Peter Zeihan moment. You guys follow Peter Zeihan?
I've seen. I don't follow him, but I've seen. What is his name? The guy they always say looks like me, but he's bald. And what is his name? He does really great videos about China.
Well, I follow Peter Zeihan like it's the masochistic part of me. Okay, it's almost like I put on my leather and rubber suit to watch him because it's just so masochistic, right? Because everything he says, and he says it with such arrogance and such, like he knows exactly what he's talking about. And he talks about the Ukrainian situation, and you're like, what the hell are you talking about? I mean, it gets to a point that he actually, pushes the meme that the Russians are taking microchips out of washing machines to use on their aircraft. I mean, that kind of bullshit, right? And there are so many of these people who are grifting and selling this incredibly false notion. And you're like, how could anybody take these people seriously? But then you realize that most people are indoctrinated. Most people are psyoped.
It's Nathan Rich. Nathan Rich does these really good videos, and when he investigates somebody, I mean, he cuts straight to the core and demolishes them. And so he did a couple of videos on this Peter guy and how ridiculous all of the things he was saying were. And that's the thing. I don't understand this. Between Angelo and myself, we spend a lot of time before this crisis began in Ukraine. We were mostly focused on Asia and China. Angelo lives in China. I live in Thailand. So this is our area of focus. We have done, like me personally, I've done thousands of articles, hundreds of videos, putting out the evidence that everything the US, the Western media is saying about China, it's a lie. They're lies. They're making up lies. And I have the documented evidence to prove it. But I always add to that, do you honestly think that China is the first thing the Western media is telling the truth about? And the answer is obviously no. It's common sense. But people will say, well, Brian, you can't just assume that the West is lying just because they lie about everything else. But the whole point is I've spent years proving it with evidence. So I don't understand who these people are who insist on repeating Western lies about China or about anywhere else when they have already seen the West lie about something else, like say Ukraine, for instance.
Well, no, I mean the rationale is pretty straightforward. Like Peter Zeihan, right? He makes a very comfortable living for himself, giving these talks to different institutions and different people and whatnot. And because of it, you give the audience what they want to hear, what they want, what they already believe. And so, of course, that's what he does. He tells his audience not the truth, but what they want to hear. And so those are basically lies. And so that's what's going on. Yeah. I think one of the I don't quite know how to call it, not quite trauma, but shock, certainly, is that the Americans in particular did not realize that Russia is not a country, gas station masquerading as a country. It's a real country with real industrial depth, the sort of which the West no longer has. And I think that for a lot of people in the American military, they must be kind of shocked to realize that they don't have what it takes to go up toe-to-toe against the Russians. Because I think that they were locked into this 90s mentality that Russia was just bankrupt and kaput, and that, that Putin hadn't done anything in the 20-odd years that he had been in power. And I think that has been quite the shock for them. Because I know for a fact that it's the Pentagon that is screaming about not wanting to put troops on the ground. They've gone so far as to send American contractors to operate a lot of the gear that they've been sending to Ukraine. I've seen video evidence of this. It's very clear that there are a lot of American contractors who are in Ukraine operating the HIMARS systems, the M777s, and whatever other toys that they've sent this way. But the Pentagon does not want any kind of toe-to-toe fight. That's why there hasn't been any no-fly zone. I mean, remember at the beginning of the war, they were constantly talking about having a no-fly zone over Ukraine, and that would turn the tide and shit like that. And that talk died off very quickly.
I don't know if I don't think the Pentagon is entirely confident that they could actually implement just Russian air defense systems alone. Western analysts admit that they are the best in the world, that they are extremely formidable, and that NATO countries have no version of the things that Russia has. So doing a no-fly zone, you're just not able to do that. And actually the same goes with China, where they have the largest, most my brain, because I've been sick for the last couple of days. They have a huge variety of missiles that both the US and Russia don't have, because they had those arms control treaties. So China was able to develop missiles that neither the US nor Russia has, and they have huge numbers of them. And this is, that Peter Zeihan guy is saying, China has to get fishing boats and put their soldiers on and go invade Taiwan. Like, why? They have missiles. Why would they ever have to send soldiers to Taiwan? It makes no sense. So it's things like this. Angela, you were talking about the stock market. We know investors who look at the fundamentals of a company and people who day to day chase rumors and make decisions based on that. It seems like the West is run by the latter instead of the former these days.
Yeah, I want to add, you mentioned spending, the investment into military spending for China. Just take the Chinese figure into purchasing power parity, one thing. But additional to that, I think there's so much waste and corruption in U.S. military spending. Additional to that, they have to maintain 800 bases around the world. I think China, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised that actually talking about tangible assets, investment, those investments translate into tangible weapons, boats, and so on. It's probably at the same level of the US, just because there's so much waste and corruption.
I agree, and the same goes for Russia also. I mean, that is why you look at the budget. The graph is there's so much disparity between the US and everyone else. But then you look at Russia in Syria or now in Ukraine, and you look at the US, and it's because there's all that waste, that all of that extra billions the US is spending is on corruption.
Yeah. By the way, I wanted to show this to you guys, that I spotted it yesterday or a couple of days ago. This is the pin for those people in the US military involved in online psyops. Persuade, change, influence. And as you see, it's got gray, white, and black background. That's for the online, the dark web, and the gray web, if you will. And the horse is supposed to represent a Trojan horse. And the twin lightning swords represent speed and efficacy. And this is a real thing, by the way. This is the U.S. Army's PSYOP that on Twitter, I do believe they're the ones who got me banned on Twitter. I was pissed off. I was well on my way to 100,000 followers. I had 70,000, and I was advancing at a good between 200 and 500 follower clip per day, and then gone. I got mass brigaded by, I guess, these guys. So yeah, what I'm finding incredibly interesting is that the West sort of like believes the corporate bullshit that the information space is the most important space, and they are pushing this. They've become so convinced of the corporatist talk of how information is the future and all that, that they've confused the Twitter war, the information war, with the actual war. And initially, I have to admit, I was deeply concerned that the West would fall for the trap of thinking that if you're winning the PSYOP war, you're winning the actual war, so you might as well just go in with the boots on the ground and quote unquote mop up. And thank God somebody with a little more sense than that sort of like halted that. But I've been blown away by the informational, this wave of bullshit. It's just, I'm sorry, I just had to bring that up. It's off topic, but that's something that
not really. It's not really off topic, because I mean, this is the whole reason why I do what I do, because I look at the news and I'm being lied to, and it drives me crazy. And I see the damage. Lies do create real world damage. There's no doubt about that.
Oh yeah.
But as you were saying, and this is something that people here in Thailand have kind of noticed. They noticed the US backed mobs and how, they're winning in information space. But if everyone else just goes out into the real world and builds something real, this information warfare isn't going to be able to overcome it. You should never underestimate the damage that it could do, because it really does. I think it's interesting, Gonzalo, that it says persuade, change, and influence, and ultimately they could do none of the above. They just had to block you. That's interesting.
Yeah, because I guess I was persuading better than them, changing and
influencing
better than.
Yeah, just had to take you out altogether.
Yeah, and I find it just on the other news that I knew for actually several months at this point, but I mentioned about 10 days ago or a week or so ago that I'm on the Mirotoverts hit list. That hit list where they have all the enemies of the Zelensky regime. The website that is run out of Washington and Brussels, because somebody traced their IP and traced it back to NATO headquarters in Brussels, of all places. And even on the site of this hit list, the Peacemaker hit list, right? They have the address Langley, Virginia, and Warsaw, Poland. I was like, why are they doing this? Why is it that the American government is actively saying that they're behind this hit list? But these people, man. How can I put it? If they weren't so dangerous, they would be so laughable. But that's the problem. It has real world consequences, and it influences decision making, and these horrifying decisions that are being carried out. Because I do believe that there is a substantial, certainly a majority of the leadership classes in Western Europe who truly believe in their naivete that, Putin evil and everything he's doing is without motivation. He's just a madman. And that's why we're in the conflict that we are in. And it's so dispiriting, because there's no way to convince them otherwise. Yeah. And people like Peter Zion and other influencers just keep on pushing this bullshit because it makes them money. I think that
it does. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing that, the other time when we were talking, Brian, the difference between purpose-driven and profit-driven. You made that distinction that I think was extraordinarily apt, because ultimately I think, and correct me if I'm wrong about you two, but you are purpose-driven. You want to get at the truth as to what's actually happening. That's certainly my motivation. I'm not interested in one side winning or another side winning. I just care about to know what's going on, and like I said before, to end this conflict as quickly as possible. But these people, they are profit-driven. Everything is about money, and with no thought as to the future. And that's the thing I find truly bizarre, because Angelo, you're in the private sector. You run businesses of various sorts. I've run some businesses myself, and I'm always thinking of not the next quarter. I'm thinking of next year, the year after that, 5 years later. How can I position it so that whatever project I'm working on endures and prospers? I'm not thinking of cashing in 3 months' time. It doesn't occur to me. But all of these people who are in leadership positions, in political leadership positions, they have this short-term mentality of the next 3 months. Will my numbers be up in the polls? Will I make a big splash, a big headline over the next few weeks or months? They're not thinking of the long-term benefit of their people, because, well, ultimately, I don't think that they identify the people of their country as their people. They view them as cattle, you know. Sorry for ranting randomly in this direction.
No, but I think I like the fact that, you know, we ask ourselves why, the question why, you know, that logical level, not what and how, but really why, and really the meaning. And I think it's important just that everybody's clear about the reason we're doing that. And I think if we have a really substantial, very meaningful mission behind what we do, it makes it more powerful, you know. And it's not about ego. I think it's about really how much contribution. And I think, you know what, it's about, I like to take the example of being able to look at yourself in the mirror and somehow being able to say, well, I did the right thing. And somehow I like also to take the example of, you know, it's just if there's one thing that I can teach my son, is that it's about my actions, what I did, and when I did it. When I had to speak out, I did it. You know, and the expense, you know, I gain nothing. Actually, I lose of my free time that I could spend with my family. And it's painful, you know, because we talk about war, we talk about something, it's extremely unhealthy. But you know what? I'd rather do that because I know deep inside this is the right thing. My question when it comes to myself is, what if there's a global war? You know, I think it will be very difficult, especially if my country is actually involved in the wrong side. That would be the difficult side. But I think it's more the step. I look at more the step before that happen. When that happened, you know, my job is done. You know, I think it's about trying to prevent and telling people, you know, I think it's, especially, I've been in China for 27 years. I've seen the China side really, and I've seen the Western side. And I think somehow I feel, you know, there's legitimacy for me to speak out and say, you know what, China is not the evil communist party. There's so much lies out there. And you have self-proclaimed experts. They are on TV. They've seen China on pictures and they read a few books and they are experts. And I'm like, you know what, I have to speak out. And when I look at the direction, I'm like, this is wrong. This is completely wrong. We need to do something.
Yeah.
Excuse me, guys. I have to go. Okay. It was a great pleasure. Really. Keep on doing that. Pleasure to be with you guys.
Yes, and Angelo will be on my channel when I start to do live streams again, which should be sometime this coming week.
Pleasure, guys.
When, and I'll post it out to my followers as well.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care, Angelo. Give a +1 to Angelo. Chad, give a +1 to Angelo as we bid him farewell. Chad will catch up, I hope, and give him lots of +1s. But no, you know, like, you've been hearing about this talk that Zelensky. This is rumor. I haven't been able to pin this down. But there's the talk of, there we go, with some +1s for Angelo. Thank you, Chad. That Zelensky is talking about doing a dirty bomb. You heard about that?
Wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't. I mean, look at what they did in Syria over and over again. They had staged chemical attacks with real chemicals. They also killed people, claimed that it was a chemical attack when it wasn't. They had these canisters that they obviously placed on top of buildings, claiming the Syrian Arab army dropped them. This is what they had been doing for years in Syria, with the U.S. completely involved, with the blessing of the U.S. and its involvement. So why wouldn't we see the evolution, the evolved progress of this process in Ukraine? I think it's inevitable. And remember, the terrorists in Syria did not have sarin or any of these chemicals. Someone gave them to them.
Oh yeah, no question.
So imagine how that would work out in Ukraine.
Yeah, because like from what I understand, and I like I said, at this point it seems to be a rumor. I have not been able to pin this down exactly the source, but there are allegations that Zelensky unilaterally is saying that Ukraine outside of has nuclear reactors apart from Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, and they have the fissionable material with which to make a dirty bomb.
Oh, you're saying they would use a dirty bomb against Russian forces?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think that's a good idea.
I think it's a horrifying idea.
I don't think that's a good idea at all, because that could escalate very quickly.
Well, I mean, geopolitically, if Zelensky were to throw a dirty bomb somewhere at the front, okay, I mean, quite apart from causing a tremendous mess that would take decades to clear up, I mean, like Chernobyl, I mean, it's still an issue, and that we're going on what, almost 35 years since that, right? And so a dirty bomb, quite apart from the environmental catastrophe and the deaths involved, and the spread of radioactivity in the area, how would that potentially escalate the conflict? I mean, I don't think that the Russians would go tit for tat and drop a tactical nuke in response to that. I mean,
I don't know. I mean, it depends on what Ukraine cobbled together, what damage it did, where it did it. It would depend on many factors. I don't think it would be a good look for Ukraine, and they're all about optics. So maybe this is something that is not likely to happen. Hopefully, because like you said, there's potential there for escalation. Even if Russia didn't respond with a tactical nuclear weapon, there's a lot of other things that they could do. There's a lot of things that people keep saying that, oh, special military operation, that's a euphemism for total war. Russia's at total war with Ukraine. It is not. It can step it up, and we're going to see it. And that's part of the reason why the West is kind of having a bit of a meltdown over the mobilization, because they know it. They know that this is a real escalation. You're going to be able to compare and contrast the before and the after of the mobilization as soon as it starts having an impact on the battlefield. So yeah.
I mean, like when I hear that kind of irresponsible talk, see, 2 months ago I would have laughed at it, but to tell you the truth, the Nord Stream thing, it really freaked me out. I mean, that's when I thought to myself, these people are off the hook. It's just they have no limits. They have no brakes. I mean, because it really is, there is simply no way to replace that gas. A lot of people are saying that Azerbaijan is going to be able to replace a lot of that gas because they're buying from the Russians and selling it at triple price to the Europeans. I don't think that they have the capacity for that, quite frankly. I don't think that there's any way for the Europeans to recover from Nord Stream, from the loss of Nord Stream. And so, if they're willing to do that, I mean, what else are they willing to do? I mean, not merely entertain it, because we can entertain all kinds of ideas that we don't seriously think that we're going to pursue. But these people actually do not only entertain crazy ideas, but pursue them. They think that it's the smart thing, that they're somehow getting ahead of the Russians. I mean, that's how I look at it. I mean, then I have to tell you that when I heard about Nord Stream, I did a quick video about it, basically saying that the Americans declared war on the Europeans, because that's how I look at it at any rate. And a lot of Germans seem to be thinking along the same lines. But thinking about it more calmly and cold-bloodedly, I'm thinking this is a catastrophe for Europe that they're not going to recover from. And the Americans went ahead and did this. What else would they be willing to do if they get panicked enough and spooked enough? If they feel that the situation in Ukraine is so spiraling out of control, meaning, of course, that the Russians are winning so decisively, what else will they do? And I can't think of a limit. And when you start talking about nuclear weapons, I keep thinking to myself that they're planning on smuggling in a nuclear weapon, blowing it up in Ukraine, and blaming the Russians for it, or some nonsense like that. I mean, that's what I truly think that they're contemplating.
Yeah. That is a good point to bring up. When I was writing about Nord Stream 2 for years and years, I was saying, well, they'll use soft power, they'll do a color revolution, they'll try to ratchet up tension in Ukraine. One of the options that I don't think I ever mentioned was them just blowing up the pipeline, because I was like, that's too ridiculous. They would never do that.
Yeah.
They would try to do everything else to politically sabotage it, or disrupt the markets through sanctions and things like that. I never thought they would be as direct as attacking the pipeline. But
and
here we are.
Yeah, and by the way, when Newland and Biden said one way or the other the pipeline is not going to come online, I thought that they meant politically. I think that everybody assumed that. And they went ahead and did this for real. I mean,
But just to be clear, this talk about stopping Nord Stream 2, this spans multiple presidencies.
Yeah,
Biden was just the last suit in front of a podium talking about it. They had been putting sanctions and pressuring and playing games. And you just have to think, how far back does this all go? To 2014, Ukraine. That was part of it also. I mean, it's all part of one big plan to encircle and contain Russia. Cutting off the pipelines, disrupting Russian national security by building up Ukraine as a threat. Many things all at one time. So it's really disturbing, because we're at this juncture now where the U.S. is again, like I don't have the smoking gun, the fingerprints on it that said, but the U.S. has the means and definitely the motive. It benefits the most.
Yes. I mean, like, of course, I agree with you that the caveat that this is speculation on our part, but we're all grown-ups, man. I mean, we all know, come on. The Russians blew up their best bargaining chip, just because they had a tantrum. Oh, come on.
And they just so happen to lock the Europeans in step with the Americans in the process.
Yeah,
it's so obvious.
Yeah, it's so obvious that it's understandable to maintain credibility to say this is speculation, but come on. I mean, who else would have means, motive, opportunity? And on top of that, the gremlins on 4chan, they've been going all over, shipping patterns and stuff like that. They know exactly which ship did it, okay? I saw it on Pole the other day, and then with little maps of like where it was going. And apparently the ship that probably did it, the American ship, the Kearsarge, Kearsag, I believe it's spelled, had been there since June. So potentially this is something that they had in their back pockets for quite a while, and they were waiting for the right opportunity. That's my way of thinking about it. But
years ago, the desperation of the U.S. to stop Nord Stream 2, just years ago, if you were really following it closely, it was palpable. You could feel the desperation, how desperate they were to stop it. And you really, like, in the back of your mind, you were really asking yourself, how far are they willing to go to stop this? There's no way they can allow this to happen, because if this happens, this is an irreversible step away from the direction of American primacy over Europe, and then away from American primacy over the entire world. And so they were not going to allow it.
Well, let me ask you to follow that. How far are they willing to go? How far are they willing to go insofar as letting Ukraine lose?
What do you mean? Like, in terms of destroying Ukraine, they will completely destroy it in every way possible if it gets them one step closer to their goal. So they're not counting Ukraine. The more Ukrainians dead, the better. The more infrastructure obliterated, the better. As long as they can continue this, as long as they think Russia is paying a price, as long as they think they're buying themselves time to pull, some other trick out of their hat, they're more than happy to do it. One thing I want to warn people about is, if this is what they're doing to Ukraine, they're going to do the whole thing to Europe as a whole. It's not just Ukraine that is a proxy. Europe is also a proxy being used, and they will use it up completely. They have no interest at all in what happens, as long as they're advancing their agenda, or at least they think they're moving toward an opportunity to advance their agenda. I think there's no limit.
What are you thinking insofar as that's concerned? I mean, you mentioned that they're willing to throw Europe under the bus, but what do you mean that? What do you mean by that?
Just destroying their economies, if they could, in the ultimate scenario, somehow maybe trigger some kind of conflict between Europe itself and Russia. I don't know. It's whatever they can do. At this point, we can't say they're not willing to cross this line or that. What we have to do is start kind of wargaming the different scenarios and see which ones are plausible, which ones have the best chance for the U.S. to succeed in doing, because they'll probably do it, no matter how crazy it seems. Like blowing up the pipeline seems crazy, but they're willing to do it. So what else could they do that could potentially advance their agenda?
What do you think?
I don't know. Like, there's certain things that you can't know unless you have access to certain types of information. So like if you were thinking about, well, let's just nuke Moscow, maybe we nuke Moscow, they'll try to retaliate, but at the end of the day, we'll come out on the winning end, no matter how bad it gets with the nuclear exchange. Somehow they've calculated that they'll come out on top. They might be willing to do that. Same goes for China. I mean, they're when they did Nord Stream, it's just they're in a different place right now with their thinking, where it is real desperation. I don't see that was calculated. Because what if there really is no way to turn Europe around, and it's just the economy is collapsing, people are out in the streets. How do you turn it around? How do you get that energy to Europe to turn things around? They've burned their bridge. They've burned their bridge. They cannot cross back.
No, I mean, like, it's Europe is done for. I mean, it's over. It's over. Between the green policies and I mean, the green policies sort of like laid crippled the foundations of the Europeans, because so many of them actually believe that the fucking windmills and the fucking solar panels in fucking Europe, of all places, will actually, make up for the lost energy from natural gas, and oil. They are just so blinded by that. I mean, they believe it. I mean, enough of them believe it that, that's. I wonder at one point, will they sort of like wake up from this? Or it could be, and looking at it from a real macro perspective, the European continent since the collapse of the Roman Empire up until, I don't know, let's just arbitrarily say 1492, when the Spanish kicked out the Arabs from the Spanish Peninsula. Europe was a backwater. Europe has always been a backwater. I mean, you look at, even stepping back even further in the macro historical picture, it's always been Asia. And it's always been a series of, lucky breaks and certain other events that happened post 1492 that turned Europe into this powerhouse. And maybe, there is simply no way to stop the slide of the European peninsula and its daughter empires, like the American Empire, from sliding back into political irrelevancy once again. I mean, it could be that. It could be that the wheel of history has come full circle for Europe, and it's going to go back to being the political backwater that it has always been, because it always has been. I mean, don't kid yourself. The entire European peninsula was insignificant on a global and trade level insofar as the rest of the world. It was always China and South Asia that mattered, and so maybe this hysteria is on some level a fundamental understanding that that's where Europe is going back to. I don't know. I mean, I'm just spitballing here.
Yeah. But, well, I mean, the thing is, like I said, it most certainly didn't have to be this way, and it is a very small handful of people that have convinced a larger amount of people to take this path. And it's very, very unfortunate, because when I would say not that long ago, I thought, with this Nord Stream 2 comes online, it's going to be a new era for Europe. They're finally going to be able to make their own choices and really pursue development, reach their full potential. And they weren't able to, and it's just getting more and more extreme as the U.S. is, they're clutching on to everything so tightly, and they're breaking everything as they're crushing it in their hands, trying to hold on to it so it doesn't float away. And I don't know, this Nord Stream, people, they're not talking about it in the Western media. We talked about that. It's a very strange period of time. It's something that I think is much more significant than I think people realize right now.
Oh yeah,
you're like, oh, it's just a pipeline, big deal. No. But I think it represents something really, really a dramatic shift in the thinking mindset.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, insofar as the global American empire. The fact that they're getting away with it, because they are getting away with it, because nobody's really holding them to account, even though everybody knows that they did it. Putin is the only one who said so outright in his speech. And I think a lot of people will admire him for having had the gumption to flat out say the Americans did it. No fooling around. But the rest of the world understands what's going on. But the fact that the Europeans themselves are passively accepting this, it really feels that they're just, like I said before, there's a fundamental passivity in the European people, that they're allowing themselves to be obliterated. And I for one, find this tragic, because, I come from Chile, and so we have this mentality of being a very peripheral people, because we are fucking ends of the earth, right? Henry Kissinger said it best about Chile. He said that Chile is a geopolitical dagger aimed straight at the heart of Antarctica. So that's very accurate. We have always been a marginal people, and so we always thought of Europe as the center of the world. And I grew up with European civilization, European history, literature, the arts, everything. It's European. I'm a man of the West, and I don't make no apologies for it. And to see the brilliant Western civilization just collapsing like this, and it's been on the collapse for a long time, certainly on a cultural level, it's been collapsing for decades. I always think that that Europe really committed suicide with World War I. Think of all the men who were lost, who would have made a real difference insofar as Europe is concerned. I mean, we saw a few of them, people like Sigrid Sassoon, C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, and God knows how many other great writers, great thinkers were lost to this pointless war. But since then, it's like it's been a slow fade of Europe. And here it seems that the Americans were the ones who stuck the dagger through Europe's heart. Because I mean, looking at the numbers, looking at it from a statistical basis of the energy needs that Europe has, European industry most specifically, and the amount of energy that they're going to bring in via the new Norway-Poland pipeline, Turk Stream, and whatever other LNG ships or whatever, it's just not enough. It's just not enough. The deficit is too great. And so Europe will be completely deindustrialized. And there will be no possibility to rebuild it, because there isn't going to be the energy necessary to rebuild industry for at least the next 10 years. I mean, even assuming that somebody was crazy enough to build another pipeline, which nobody is ever going to do again, it seems that I don't think people realize, like you said, how consequential this moment has been this past week. It really is the death of Europe. I mean, in a real way, I don't see them recovering from this. I mean, tell me if I'm being too black-pilled, but
I don't think so. I think people might have it wrong. We always say fighting Russia to the last Ukrainian, but maybe it's to the last European. It could be that the West is just going to, the U.S. is going to They're using Ukraine. They're going to try to drag Europe into it as much as possible. I mean, that is one of the reasons why you would put them in such a desperate situation, that there was no other exit out. What other exit? Alex Christoforu was talking about this, or maybe you said it. Regime change in Russia. This is their dream. Regime change in Russia, and then getting their hands on all the energy. Well, now Europe has no exit out of this. There's no reconciliation with Russia the way it is now. So maybe the U.S. can. Maybe the U.S. can convince Europe to go all in on trying to enact regime change in Russia, one way or another. I don't know. I guess we'll be finding out.
Yeah, I mean, they simply cannot regime change Putin, because everybody in the Kremlin is on the same page, And I don't think that there is a single important functionary in the Kremlin that has a different opinion. And as we always say, Putin is one of the moderates within the Kremlin. That's what people keep forgetting. And I think that all of the doves, Medvedev seems to have been the dove that really turned into a hawk. And I think that most of the doves in the Kremlin have gone Medvedev's way of basically being, screw these people, let's go for broke. And in his legalistic, very measured way, Putin has been the one putting the brakes. If he weren't around, it would be total war. And perhaps that's what they want. They want the regime change so that there is total war. Because I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before. I've certainly mentioned it on stream, that there is a clique within the American leadership class that truly believes that a global war would kickstart the American economy and would be beneficial to the American economy, restart it, reignite it. They have this bizarre notion that the only thing that saved the United States from the Great Depression was the Second World War. That's not accurate. In fact, the American economy was recovering despite so many of the New Deal programs. I mean, the 37 recession mini depression was caused by FDR's economic policies, but that's for another conversation. The point is, this clique in Washington, people like Paul Krugman is typical, but also Janet Yellen and her husband, Stiglitz, they all have this notion that a global war, because of America's geographic isolation, would be good for the American economy, reindustrialize it, and bring it back on top. They don't seem to understand that the world has changed radically from 1945, and they don't seem to realize that the weapons that are at the disposal of Russia and China are such that the United States would not be isolated. I'm not talking about nuclear weapons. I'm talking about conventional strikes that they could hit the United States with incredible precision, no warning whatsoever, and to devastating effect. I mean, they haven't thought this through. They're sort of like living in a weird fantasy land, of living on their own propaganda. And so what I'm hoping for is that the Russians what I was hoping for, quite frankly, was for the Russians to keep on grinding away at Ukraine in this slow, measured, just daily grind until the Zelensky regime just collapsed. And the Russians just took it over and allowed the Western sliver to go to Poland and push all the crazy neo-Nazis into that little sliver around Lviv and make it become Poland's problem, Poland's Vietnam, right? And quiet down and simmer this whole thing. But after this Nord Stream incident, I mean, to tell you the truth, I think that we are closer to a nuclear war than even the '62 Cuban Missile Crisis. I don't see any other geopolitical event that destabilizes as much as this situation. And the ramifications for Europe are catastrophic. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the whole thing with nuclear war. Russia, the United States, they have access to information that we don't. They can see the outcome of what it's going to be like on the other side of a nuclear exchange better than someone like you or I could. And who knows if the U.S. is looking at it and they're like, well, it's not great, but it's better than it is. They're so obsessed with hegemony and maintaining primacy. I don't know. Maybe they think that well, it'll be a big hit, but we could rebuild, but at least Russia will be gone. It'll be gone. China will be gone.
Yeah, the thing that I find surprising is that, see, they don't have any notion as to why they are going in this direction. They want hegemony and full spectrum dominance as an end in itself, as opposed to something that they can achieve with this global hegemony. You know,
that's true.
And that's the bizarre thing. You know, the notion of having power for the sake of power, something with it. You know, they have no conception of that.
Yeah, they lack any kind of vision when they talk to the people about what's, you know, it's always in these very abstract and ambiguous terms. They don't have a vision for the future of the world, or maybe they do and they just don't want to tell you what it looks like because you're not going to like it. You're not going to like it. You don't want to be on board.
Eat the bug, live in the pod. You will own nothing and be happy. I guess that's their vision, apparently.
Something like that.
Anyway, we've been going on for 2.5 hours, and it's been a pleasure as always. But I think we're going to be winding down the stream. I hate to hit this at you, you know, in such short notice. But do you have like a final thought that you'd like to leave our audience with? Because we've had about 5,000 concurrent viewers, which is great. Thanks, Chad. I hope you've been enjoying the show. Anything you want to leave people with?
Yeah, I just want to say that what we see on the battlefield, in Ukraine right now, this is going to change. So whatever the trend is that you see right now, they're going to try to build up whatever gains they're making around Lyman in the northern Donbas region. Just remember that Russia is sending 300,000 more troops to this area for this conflict. They had 150,000 there since late February. Where they have set up their defenses, Ukraine has not been able to get through. The only reason they're having any success at all is because there is a lack of Russian soldiers on the battlefield, which is something they're fixing. Secondly, we see this Nord Stream pipeline attack. This is very serious. It's not just a pipeline. It really is putting Europe in an inescapable situation where their only option is to fight their way out. This is by design. The U.S. does not want them being reasonable, sensible, and fixing anything with Russia. They want this to be a death match in a locked cage. That's what blowing up the pipelines just did. So we have to be very vigilant and start trying to think and help each other figure out what else could they possibly do to escalate, to make this more dangerous, but not too dangerous that they can't control. This is the challenge for us going forward, is thinking about this and keeping an eye out open for it. And as always, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to do these.
No, whenever you want to, hop on whenever. My final thought is, Chad and Brian too, you have no idea how few people are the ones pushing this agenda. It's not a widespread thing. It's not like in the Kremlin, where you have an entire leadership class that really understands that this is existential and they're going to fight to the last man, but it's a wide swath of people in Russia. No, in the West, in the United States, it is a remarkably small class of people in Washington and a few of their lieutenants in Brussels who are pushing this. And they have a whole host of puppets in the leadership classes of Western Europe that are going along with their insanity. But the actual people are very, very few. And as I said before, they have no ambition other than to hold on to power for its own sake. They have no interest in doing anything positive. They can't build. They can only destroy and hold on to power. And they're willing to destroy anybody and everything in order to hold on to this power. And that's the great tragedy. And so you should be aware of that. So yeah, that's my final thought. Brian, stick around just a bit so I can say a few private words. Show, and I will catch you guys next time. Take it easy.